Welcome back. My tripod actually got taken when my husband moved everything, so this is kind of a weird angle, so I apologize for that. You might see this and this weird angle for a couple videos, so just bear with me. I'm going to pre-record some stuff, some story time, some case studies. Today I thought I would start with a little story time about my experience working in the animal welfare field during COVID. If you've seen my video, which I'll put a link up here, I talked about how I got my start in the field, that I started as a volunteer, and then I ended up getting a job at a shelter in Missouri. I was working there. I started there in the fall of 2018, just going through it. And then at the end of, I think it was at the end of 2019, must have been, we moved facilities. So our whole shelter kind of packed everything up and moved to this brand new facility, newly built, very beautiful, very big, lots of good things happening. And I remember being really, really sick in December before that happened. So that would have been December 2019. I remember being so sick trying to do stuff, and I remember I actually called out from work at that time, which I usually will like stick it through unless I feel like I'm actually contagious, but I didn't. I remember going into work my first day doing surgery alone by myself, a little bit of a more difficult doctor, and I remember I had no voice. So I had to kind of get through surgery, which it was fine because it wasn't a huge caseload, but it was my first day alone running surgery with no voice. So I thought I was just like, oh, I have bronchitis, and I had that for a week. And then after that, I got really, really sick where I could not stay awake. I had a fever, coughing a lot, sore throat, and I remember feeling super congested in my chest. I could feel my breathing, which I had never really felt before. So I have a theory that I actually, and then my husband got it a week after me, but his was much closer, where mine lasted for 2 weeks. He was over it in about 1 week. So it hit him harder, faster, but not for as long. I have a theory that we had some kind of it before it actually went crazy in the US, but I don't know. I have no way to prove that unless I get an antibody test, which I'm not paying for that. At the shelter we moved in, so I was better by the time the move was happening, so I could actually help move. I ended up transporting a bunch of stuff and a couple dogs. Animal welfare as a field is already you have to show up every single day. We work 7 days a week. We work every holiday. We, you have the staff, not me personally, but the staff has to be there every single day of the year to take care of the animals, and especially the medical side as well, because Thanksgiving, Christmas, those are prime time for things to happen with animals. So whether that's, getting hit by a car with the weather, or, just being left outside in inclement weather, things happen all the time to animals, both owned and strays, and we have to be there to care for them and care for the ones we already have in our shelter. We were already essential workers. We have to go in. We can't just work from home. Someone has to go in every day. It was a difficult time because we moved into this new building. We were restructuring everything, figuring out how we were going to do all this new stuff. We were getting new management into the clinic. So they had hired a medical director and a practice manager for us, and they were going to start a couple months after the move. So we moved and opened in January, and they were going to start a couple months after that. So that's already a huge change coming in. And then they wanted to make all these huge changes, because they want to make the system better, obviously, and stuff like that. So it was a lot of change very quickly, and a lot of pressure on us already to change and do more. It was just a lot all at once. What was it, March, April time, when the pandemic really started to ramp up, and they started to put out stay-at-home orders, and they started to, you really started to feel this is serious, and a serious thing happening, and it was very scary. Obviously, we all know. We couldn't just not go in. What ended up happening has happened at a lot of places that I've now learned, is that they basically split the staff into 2 teams. So you had Team A, or whatever, is composed of these 6, 7, 8 people that work these days. And then the next half of the week is team B, which is only these people, and those work that half of the week. And we never overlapped. So you were only interacting with the same people at the same time. So you weren't interacting with a bunch of people, different people every single day or anything like that. Cut down the amount of like crossover you could have. We all wore a mask every day, all the time, obviously. And we weren't really interacting with the public that much. I think times when we had owners or fosters bringing in animals to the clinic where they would have to wear masks, I think we asked them to wait outside at least. I don't think we had them wait in their car. We never had like a big amount of like drop-offs or something, so it was never like people stay in your car so they don't interact. It was more like stay outside so you don't come in and interact with us very much. So we didn't have really much of that, which is kind of normal at a shelter. So I know that when after this I started working in emergency, and we would have people wait in their cars, call and say they were here, what was going on. They could come in if it was something very urgent, but they really had people stay in their cars away from everyone else. And then we would go out, talk, get the pet, bring it in, do stuff. But that's what we did at our shelter. So we had the 2 teams and we did everything pretty much like normal with masks. There was a lot of confusion about, when you should test and what and blah, and it was a whole thing. And I really had a moment of anxiety, which I think a lot of us did with COVID because, we have family members who are more at risk, or just general OCD anxiety about medical issues and stuff like that. So there was a moment when I remember feeling a little sore throat, which is not unusual. Obviously, I have like allergies, seasonal allergies and stuff like that, so it's not unusual. But when you have something like COVID being like, this is one of the first symptoms you get in your mind, right? And then my husband is a truck driver, so he's an essential worker. Truck driving was classified as essential work, which is crazy because you're traveling all around constantly and you're in places that are not sanitary, like truck stops, and you have to go and shower in them, and how well are they cleaning them, like all this stuff. And maybe if my husband one day wants to come on video and stuff, I might have him talk about his experience because it was crazy. Like some of the stuff he saw and experienced, and just the being out there having to go against every recommendation, every official recommendation you have to go against to do your job. My husband is also immunocompromised, so not only is he out there putting himself at risk every day, and then I maybe contract something, and then I'm gonna go home to him when he is home. Like, it was just really stressful, and my management wasn't very empathetic to that situation. They were just like, well, you need to show up. And then when I did show up, they were like, why are you here if you're symptomatic? Like, you need to go get a test. And I was like, what do you mean? I don't understand. And so there was a lot of back and forth and frustrations, which caused a lot of strain on my relationship with my management there, because I was just trying to do the right thing for myself and my family, and also not get fired or do the right thing as far as my coworkers and stuff. So it was like, I don't know if anyone else experienced that, but that was a big thing. And I was like, you're just not being very sympathetic, and you're not being clear, and just, not realizing that we're all scared of this thing, and we should be sympathetic to other people and not just be pounding the drums of not even capitalism, because we work in a nonprofit, but just be at work and only work and blah. No one cares about your problems. Yeah, mid 2020 that happened, and it was very frustrating. Even nonprofits are not immune to that kind of thing with management. So one of the big things that happened towards the beginning, so they split us up into the teams, and then the company started putting out options for employees. So they put out this survey through all the managers for you to choose if you wanted to keep working or if you wanted to take furlough. So furlough allowed people to apply for government assistance because they, lost their job or weren't working. And then, so they could apply for government assistance and not come into work, but still have the promise of having a job when things calm down more and we could all get back to normal. About half of the people like in the clinic took furlough, and it was really a big question like among my coworkers, but it was never really a question for me because I was like, I'm just gonna keep working. Like, what am I gonna do? Not work. That's dumb. And I need money. That was my thought process. Like, I didn't even think about taking furlough, really. I thought about it for maybe 5 minutes, but that was it. And I'm really glad I didn't do it because I heard from a bunch of coworkers that by the time they came back to work, they had not received government assistance, like monetary assistance, and I don't know if they ever did. I was glad that I had not done that, but I was appreciative also that our company offered that, especially for people who might have been more nervous about coming in and, interacting with other people, even though we had all these precautions in place. To us, anyway, in the clinic, it seemed like our intakes went down. We weren't having as much things come in so quickly, like we could never catch up, which was a usual day where it was like you'd start a day thinking you're going to do these things, and then things would come in like consistently throughout the day that you had to take care of, and you didn't get what you set out to do done. Like you could never catch up. There was just always more and more, and you had to prioritize your cases. To us, it felt like there was a lot less of that, and I don't know if it was because people weren't going out as much to find like strays running loose or get into trouble with animals or something like that. There wasn't as much of that because people weren't going out. I think more people staying in, maybe they were more cognizant of like their animals and what was happening, less of like animals getting out when people weren't home. All of that, I think, were contributing factors. We also were at a point where we were taking over animal control. So animal control was running like, I think, a skeleton crew at that point. So they weren't going on as many calls. They weren't picking up as many cases and stuff like that. So we weren't getting like hardly anything from animal control. And so our caseload was much less. They ended up having me cover hospital, like clinic focused animal care 3 days a week or 2 days a week that I was there or something like that. So 2 days of the week I wasn't really doing tech stuff. I was doing animal care. I would take care of the animals that were housed in the clinic, so that they weren't the main shelter population, just these animals that were medical cases. And so I would go in, start laundry, medicate, feed, take them out, clean their kennels, all that stuff. There were like 2 main techs, a surgery tech and then an animal care person, and I think 1 vet. And then our administrative person. So that's like 6 people to run everything. And so I was doing covering animal care for a couple days, and that also allowed me to like help them with other things. So like any bandages that might have needed to be done on those patients, any like pain medication, splints, anything like that I could help with. At the beginning, I resented it because I really was not getting along with the new management. Let's just throw that out there. And I didn't understand why like I was being singled out to cover animal care and why it couldn't be like we switch off or whatever. But I think there was a motivation there because I ended up finding out that the management thought I was lazy and thought I wasn't a hard worker and thought I was basically shit at my job. I think that is why they put me in that position, and I really resented it at the beginning. And I felt like they were trying to push me out, and this just gave them like a great out to do that. And I still believe that to this day. But I will say, I enjoyed having that kind of break from the craziness, not only like COVID breaking it up to have like some kind of like relief from everything that we had been doing when we were in the full swing of things, but also it did really kind of open me up to what is my passion now, which is ICU. Especially with ICU animals, when you are the tech, you're really hands-on with the animals. You're really hands-on with your patients. You know, like, what's going on with them, how they're progressing, every nuance in their behavior or in their progress. So I remember vividly when we got back to like full swing of things, going back there to check on a cat that I knew how he was normally, and he would always come up to the front of the kennel and rub all over you and be super active and eat and all this stuff. And I remember going back one day and he was not doing any of that, and I was like, this is weird. Asked the doctor to look at him, and he was running a fever of like 105 or something like that. And so just like being there all the time with the patients and like constantly doing vitals, things like that, like you really are in tune with them and what they need. So I really enjoy that. That is the thing I enjoy about my work now, and what I did at the shelter before this was really ICU work and being hands-on with the animals and knowing them to a point where I know what they need, how they're progressing, you know, what works and what doesn't in terms of housing, what special things they might need for their kennel, or being able to figure out different ways to make them more comfortable or make things easier for them to heal. And so that really did open the door for that. So I appreciate it on that sense, because I would never have thought, like, I don't think I would have seen as much of the value in it if I didn't do that job at that time. Like I said, it seemed like lower intakes, but when I look back at the annual reports from that year, they're not lower. So I think maybe we just weren't seeing as many critical things. Good, whether there were actually not that many critical things or they were just going somewhere else. Either way, I think maybe we just weren't seeing it in the clinic to the degree that we were used to. Because of that, we ended up putting into place this policy that wasn't in place before. So depending on the shelter and their caseload and their staffing, some shelters will do an exam on every single animal that comes in, whether it's healthy or not. Either way, they always get a veterinary exam. We didn't really do that at the shelter before. We did very minimal stuff. There were animals that never even came to the clinic for any kind of veterinary exam. So if like an animal came in healthy and already altered, a vet wouldn't look at them unless something happened while they were there that they needed to be looked at. So like eventually if they would contract kennel cough or something, then they would get an exam. But it wasn't like standard practice that everything needed a wellness exam. And so when we had less of a caseload and less stress and we had time, we started doing those on our own. Like our team with our vet, we were like, why don't we just do wellness exams on everything? Because there were a lot of times where you would get a report or something and not have time to get to it until days later, and then it's more serious just because of the amount of animals that we had. We started doing that, which was great. And I have a video of this like wiggly puppy just like bebopping along, nothing wrong. And we never got to see that before. We never got to have those moments where it's like, oh, a happy, healthy puppy. Let's make sure it has everything it needs and see if we want to do anything else. And just like, she's all good to go. And we know that she's good to go. We're not like constantly worrying and wondering if something's wrong that we're not catching. So on that like medicine tech side, that's what we spent most of our time doing. So we would take care of whatever we had in the hospital, the clinic animals. We would do whatever we needed for animals outside in general population. So if they needed recheck x-rays for something, if we needed to, recheck blood work or whatever, we would take care of them. We would do any euthanasias that needed to be done, whether they were behavior or medical or owner requested euthanasias, because we were still doing end-of-life services for the community. Any foster appointments, although we didn't have that many at that time, because I think, again, foster wasn't seeing as many critical medical cases as well. So it was very chill. It felt like a private practice in a way, but like more chill, which was nice. So that was the medicine side. Surgery wise, we always had a surgery tech there, but we had really cut down the amount of surgeries we were doing. And so the surgery tech would end up helping the medicine techs. The main reason we weren't doing surgeries very often is because there was an oxygen shortage. Like we really needed to ration out when we would use our oxygen because it was COVID, right? So a lot of people in respiratory distress being maintained on ventilators, oxygen masks, all of that. So a lot of the oxygen supply where we would get it from, hospitals would also get it from there too. So obviously medical, like human hospitals were being prioritized, which they should have been. So I think there was a cap on how much oxygen we could get, and then we really had to ration it out. So we would only really do necessary surgeries if there was an animal with a foreign body that was not doing well and we needed to do a surgery to remove the foreign body, then we would do that. We weren't busting out 30, 40, 50 spay neuters a day like normal. So we would really only do a few of those, maybe a day. I feel like there were days when they had no surgeries though. So it was really being careful with how we did that and what actually needed to be done. I think really the spay and neuters that they prioritized were the return to owner animals. So animals that somehow came into the shelter, but their owner found them and needed to reclaim them. I think it was all, I don't think it was specific breeds, but I think it was anything that came into the shelter needed to be altered when it left. So the owners had to be okay with that to reclaim them. So we would do those, we would do any emergency surgeries, and then anything else that might have needed oxygen that we could like make the case for to use them. Like that third day, because I only worked 3/12s when I worked there. My third day, I think I was doing surgery. So it was like really random to go from animal care right into surgery. It was weird. But I think at my third day I was doing surgeries, and it was really nice to not have all the pressure to do so many surgeries every single day. So I was really able to hone my skills with anesthesia and practice like intubating and catheters and monitoring and stuff like that. So it really helped take the pressure off and allowed me to focus and have the vet teach me how to do things and what to look for and how to help her. So I learned how to like scrub into a surgery and hold things. When we were at a point when we were open for adoptions, it was still mid-COVID, like, you know, still, I think the stay-at-home orders had relaxed a little bit and we were talking more about social distancing and masks and stuff. So at that point, we opened for adoptions and we did it differently. So before, anyone could go in and walk through all the kennels and look at animals, and then they would go to like a front desk or an animal care person and say, hey, I'm interested in this, or ask questions or whatever. It was very, very free form. When we were in our new place, we had that before COVID really started amping up, and it was really difficult because there were a lot of different rooms with dogs. So our building before was just like a big warehouse with a bunch of kennels in it. And now there were separate rooms and they were pretty cramped. So when I would be out trying to do meds, people would just be walking willy-nilly and trying to ask me questions that I don't know any answers to. And so it was really difficult. And so when COVID hit, they rethought their whole matchmaking adoption process, and they started having people be guided through with animal care technicians who were also like adoption counselors at that point. So a potential adopter would come in, they would wait, a matchmaker would come get them, they would walk through all the dogs, or if they had a specific one they wanted to see or they were looking for something specific, they would like help them find the animal they were looking for. And then when they found them, if they wanted to adopt someone, they bring them back to the front and start the paperwork process. The matchmakers would also take them out to yards, like one at a time to interact with the dogs, or into rooms to interact with the cats. So it was very much like a guided one-on-one process instead of just like flowing through, just walk through, whatever. And that was really good. I think a lot of the matchmaking was done much better, and there was actually more conversations happening about what people were looking for, and I think they made better matches that way. I would have to ask like someone who actually worked there in that, you know, area, in that department, but it seemed like there were more conversations happening where a lot of things that might have gotten overlooked before were talked about and considered. And so like, I think there was less of adopting out a rambunctious mastiff to an elderly person with a walker, having someone with kids adopts a dog that wasn't good with kids, like less of that misunderstanding. And so the adoption process changed that way, and they actually kept it going. I think it still runs that way because it's just, more comprehensive, more involved, and you just get a better match that way. Another new thing that started at this clinic, at this shelter, which I think other places have adopted as well from what I've looked at, was a program to help people who have lost their housing due to COVID. So a lot of people would, lose their job because they couldn't come in or whatever because of stay-at-home orders, and businesses would shut down. So then they would lose their job, stuff like that. And then in losing their job and not being able to find another one during COVID, people would lose their housing. And so they would end up staying with friends, couch surfing, staying with family in like crowded house, and not really being able to keep their animals. They set up a program that was designed to find people who would help foster animals from these people who had lost their housing until those people could find stable housing. So they called it Home Away from Home. And so a family could say, I want to foster a medium-sized dog with no issues. If a person who had lost their housing had that, they could transfer them to that home and not have to come into the shelter at all. And then they would be covered, taken care of. If anything needed to happen with that animal, we would take care of it. And then at the end, I'm not really sure the process or the financial things that went into that, but they would be able to bring them back, like reclaim them from the foster when they had stable housing. And so I thought that was really amazing because it kept the animal in somewhat of a home, in a stable environment, not having to come into the shelter at all, and, being able to get them back to their original family. So not saying, well, you have to surrender them and you'll never see them again, because that's not fair. And it wasn't fair to them that they lost their home because of a global pandemic. None of it was fair. And to force them into a decision like that was just terrible. So having a program like that really, I think, did a lot for the community and a lot for those animals too. Another one was having more of a program in place for people who had an animal, had taken care of it, but it came up with some emergent medical issue. So like it ate something and had a foreign body and needed surgery. They could apply for this program that would say, you'll surrender the pet to us, we'll deal with the medical issue, and then once they're stable and better, they can reclaim them and they'd be put on a payment plan to pay the cost of that back. They would never go up for adoption. They would never be at risk for that. There were some times where they would have that family put in as like a foster so that they could go back to that home to recover. Even though they were legally our animal at that point, they could still be in their own home with their family recovering. And as long as the family brought them back for checkups and everything, they could still reclaim them at the end and then be put on the payment plan to pay back the cost of it. So I thought that was amazing, especially for people who who you can tell really care for their animals and aren't just being negligent about things. Like, it's not like breeders just continually breeding puppies with parvo or something like that. So it was really, I think, useful for a lot of people to be able to do that and be put on a payment plan and not have to shell out like $5,000 plus at an emergency clinic that is already probably overrun, because a lot of the private clinics as well had to close down or really limit their appointment schedules. So you got a lot of people going to emergency clinics for basic things that would have otherwise been handled at their private clinic, and then having to foot the bill for that, which was, like I said, thousands of dollars. So those were some really great programs that I saw put in place that are still in place today. I think it was a just great way for them to show their community that they were about the people in their community and they were there for their community, and not just like, we're only here for the animals, not the people. It wasn't like that. That really gave me a sense of pride to be like, I work for this amazing company that's really trying to help everyone. A really big thing about where the shelter was is the community was really big, but it felt really like tight-knit. It felt like a small town community, but in a big city. You could really see that in the shelter's work and what they did for the people there. So that's pretty much it. It was a wild time. Really, there were a lot of big cases that happened in the middle of that when we were wearing our masks and back to normal, but you know, social distancing as much as possible. So I'll definitely have case studies and story times about those in the future. The next video I think I'm going to do is going to be a video that kind of coincides with this one regarding the fallout of COVID, because like I said, COVID really affected a lot of the private clinics and a lot of the other community outreach services that happen normally. So like mobile clinics and nonprofit rescues and stuff. So it really affected how many animals could access care, how many animals could come into rescue groups. There were a lot of private clinics that had to severely reduce their hours, severely reduce their appointment slots, really change the way of how they interacted with patients and clients and get them care. It was such a crazy time. It was very emotional and stressful, just with all of the anxiety and fear around COVID, and having to be an essential worker and having to go in all the time, and then having your spouse also be an essential worker. Like, that was really crazy stressful. And I'm surprised my husband I've never tested positive. My husband actually tested positive last year. I'm surprised we got through that whole time without contracting COVID. So that goes to show you how important masks are, because he only got it when he worked in an office last year. Crazy stuff. That is my little story time about COVID in the vet med world. Let me know down below if you have any questions or want to share any of your experiences. I would love to read about them. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.